our business, we hire a lot of young people, and we can live with the $1.60 wage, whereas at $2.20 it gets...
To the American small businessman, working a 60-hour week is often a luxury. It is a hard, frustrating, uphill battle just to keep alive. And he has a right to know what kind of man would lead his country.
I was out to Mitchell, South Dakota, and I understand you're from a very conservative background. How do you put this together with the accusations that you're a radical?
Well, I don't think I'm a radical. I think that the conservative origins that I come from tend to make me appreciate the first principles of the country, and I think we've departed from those principles. We started off in the Declaration of Independence with 3 affirmations. We said everyone was entitled to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. And it seems to me we've been pursuing a course in recent years that moves directly contrary to those principles. That's why I've found the war in Vietnam so obnoxious, that it seems to me to be a contradiction of everything decent that this country stands for. I'm not talking about the commitment of the individual soldier, but the whole policy of massive aerial bombardment of primitive agricultural countries I find offensive to the ideals that I was taught in a religious home. I was a bomber pilot in World War II. It's not that I'm a pacifist, but I think we have to be very careful about using the enormous military power of this country trying to achieve our objective overseas. I think that any sense of justice would call on conservatives or liberals to address the inequities in our tax system. It's just not fair. Now, people say I'm radical in saying we ought to close the loopholes in the tax laws, but I just think it's justice and common sense. I don't think it's radical to say, for example, that everybody ought to have a job, even if the government has to come in as the employer of last resort. The greatest waste we now have in the United States are the 6 or 7 million people who are unemployed. And I'd find some way to get those people back to work, either by direct contracting with private industry to begin improving our cities and building up our environment, building better transit facilities and things of that kind, or where you couldn't do it by direct contract with industry, I would do it with public service employment, because I think every able-bodied person ought to be working. And I don't regard that as a radical doctrine. What part of the charge against me do you think justifies the label radical?
Well, I myself don't feel that you are a radical. I think that you're a humanitarian, and I think that some of the things you are saying are consistent with the Christian belief. This would be my feeling, but I've heard this charge made several times.
Every leader throughout our history who has advocated change in the way things are at a given time has been called a radical. Unless you're willing to just drift with the status quo, somebody's going to call you a radical. They did that to Abraham Lincoln. They did it to Franklin Roosevelt. They did it to John Kennedy. These people that have stood for fundamental change in the country have all been branded as radicals. After they die, they become heroes. Somebody has said that a conservative is a worshiper of dead radicals.
McGovern, Democrat, for the people. The people are paying for this campaign with their hard-earned dollars. Send what you can to McGovern for President, Washington, D.C.